What is up guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. We're continuing on with my Group 1 car reviews, getting towards the end of this first big project for me of 2024, and we're moving on to a bit of a different VGT Group 1, the Bugatti VGT Group 1. In my opinion, one of the most out of place cars in this class. It's really quite bizarre how we can take something that almost feels and drives like a complete tank and turn that into a rather quite quick and very good Group 1 race car. So as usual with these car reviews, let's start off comparing the price point as well as having a look at the comparison between the Group 1 and the standard VGT. Now when it comes to the Group 1, as you can see, 891.03 pp, four-wheel drive, 641 brake horsepower, 980 kilograms, which is a massive weight reduction compared to the original VGT, as well as being turbocharged, costing 1 million credits as the standard VGT Group 1 price point. Although it's a little bit heavier than the typical kilogram weight of a Group 1 car, that is still a major drop in comparison to the standard Bugatti VGT. As you can see, the original weighs 1400 kilograms, again retains that turbocharger, but puts out a massive 1626 brake horsepower while still being four-wheel drive, 910.44 pp for the standard Bugatti VGT. So whilst they both look very alike, there is some key differences between both models, both the Group 1 and the VGT. Now something to note, it doesn't disclose a displacement for the Group 1, but I'm assuming it's very much still the original engine, just very down-tuned by almost 1000 brake horsepower. So let's talk about the Bugatti VGT, because for me this is perhaps one of the most bizarre Group 1 cars in the entire game. For me, there's two cars in this subcategory of Group 1. I like to call them these sort of, I guess, more bulky pairing of vehicles, and that is going to be this, the Bugatti VGT Group 1 and the Audi VGT Group 1. They don't quite suit the typical styling and looks that we see all the way out throughout the Group C's, all the way to the LMP1s, and including obviously the more latest hypercar that we see in this category, as well as some of the other VGTs. For me, they definitely feel from a styling standpoint that they'd be much more suited to Group 1, but when it comes to performance, we all know that the looks don't necessarily make it a good Group 1 vehicle, and I feel like that is definitely the case here. Whilst it looks out of place, the performance on this thing is absolutely fantastic. To say it doesn't have a typical hybrid boost system like a lot of the faster Group 1 cars does, this thing is still an absolute rocket out of corners. In fact, it's perhaps the most surprising thing of the bunch. It certainly retains that very weighty feel, however it will launch itself out of corners like you just wouldn't believe. Overall, it really doesn't retain the typical high speed of the standard Bugatti VGT. Most of the time it will top out anywhere from about 180 to 190. It barely even reaches the 200 mph barrier even on the longer and bigger straights. It really doesn't seem to be able to stretch its legs really like any other Bugatti. However, that's not necessarily a problem. With that insane acceleration and that very impressive aero that this car seems to feature, it will stay at a relatively high speed almost anywhere, making this very bulky and out of place Group 1 able to tackle literally any track, whether that's a very kind of tight and narrow track or a relatively high speed track. So overall, this is definitely a jack of all trade cars. I don't feel like it's a master of anything, but it certainly can hold its own almost anywhere in GT7, and I do really appreciate that about the Bugatti. So far I've actually been fairly positive about the Bugatti, and you're probably expecting me at this point in the video to sit there and completely slate it for being completely useless or not really having any benefit to the game, but I'm kind of pleased to report this time around that this car does actually have some use in the game. It's one of those cars that will sit around in my garage quite often, however it will quite often also come out and be used in the most random of events. It's a very versatile tuning platform. Unlike a lot of the Group 1s where they're very hit or miss, this is a car that sits in a nice balance of categories where I can kind of up tune it, down tune it, and get this very nice mixed build on where I can use it in almost any kind of situation. It's a very versatile car. When it comes to its racing conditions, it only really has one downside, and it's not really that big of a downside either. That is the fact that it does have a rather higher fuel consumption rate than some of the other Group 1 cars by a relative bit, to be totally honest. However, when it comes to the likes of tyre wear, one thing I did notice with this car, overall it does shred its tyres at a very decent rate. It doesn't overly burn them out, considering this is a fair bit heavier than a lot of the other Group 1s. It does have very, very good tyre life overall, and it's very, very equal in the way that it will use them up as well, which is always good. You don't necessarily always want the tyres to weigh down completely at the front or completely at the back and make the car unstable. I'd certainly say when it comes to its tyre life, whilst it isn't the best in class, it's by no means the worst either, especially for such a big and bulky vehicle. Another plus point for me when it comes to the Bugatti VGT in both models is the sound design. Like I mentioned, it doesn't disclose the actual displacement of the Group 1, however I'm very certain in saying that it's probably the standard engine just completely down-tuned by almost 1000 brake horsepower. Both of these vehicles give out this very nice brutish and very grunty sound, and I really do like driving them. So again, I'm very kind of comfortable in saying that they're definitely the same engine, it's the same exhaust note, it's the same sound from both. It's just certainly going to be a down-tuned version that we're seeing to reach those kind of group overall regulations that we see. So I think one of the most striking details of both Bugatti VGT models is that insanely aggressive aero. You've got the huge shark fin that kind of brings itself into this massive rear spoiler that kind of takes up the whole rear of the car and sort of hangs over the edges as well. I think it looks very aggressive, very in your face, and absolutely incredible. To say this is plastered on a car that would eventually become the Bugatti Chiron and definitely shares a lot of those features, it really does feel like a proper grouped race version of that road going version. So overall, in terms of the key differences when it comes to the performance of the aero package, you will notice that on the standard VGT, the rear flap of the wing will move around with braking and such, obviously to help you out. It is completely fixed in place for the Group 1. However, for me, I feel like this definitely suits the more, I guess, regulated feel of a Group 1 race car, so it certainly fits the bill. So the Bugatti VGT Group 1, is it a car that's worth getting your hands on, or should you avoid this car? I'd say honestly, if you can get over the fact that it doesn't look quite right in Group 1 and you want something just a little bit different that is basically a jack of all trades and master of none, then you really can do much worse than what you're seeing here. I think it's honestly a fantastic car, and it's definitely up there as one of the better VGT Group 1 machines overall. So with the lap done, let's head over to the lap time leaderboard and see where the Bugatti VGT Group 1 actually ranks. So the car actually does a solid job of getting itself inside that top 10, beating the likes of the Toyota TS050 and the GR010 Hybrid, which I feel originally certainly set the standard. Whilst its PP rating is relatively high and it's still a little bit slower than the Tomahawk, I honestly feel this is a much better overall car, and one car that you can definitely get used to no matter your skill level. The only real downside is just that extra weighty feeling to the car, but once you adjust, you've got a very good car here overall. And considering it's not got the assistance of a hybrid boost, I certainly feel like it holds its own there in terms of the overall category. So there we go, the Bugatti VGT Group 1. For me, it's a master of nothing. However, it is a very good car at being an all-rounder, and sometimes that's exactly what you need. So a big thank you to all of my channel members: Wigberto, Mystic, JRO49, Victory 2FL, Mailton, Louis Vieira, Old School Gamers, Crazy Cobra, Cole Wyatt, Phil Wilmot, Dominic Saylor, Dan, Sean and Chris 75572. Thank you for your continued support. Thank you to you guys at home watching. I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.